Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the moment we have been waiting for. Another stop on our virtual book tour. Some things have really popped off. Please tell us in the chat how excited you are about the new book from Minda Harts, the two-time best-selling author Minda Harts. Presented the memo to not the memo but right within to us. The memo is still a lit book. If you don't have that, check that out. But this is the Right Within virtual book tour. I'm Mike Harts. I'm Minda Harts' managing director at the Memo LLC, also her little brother. And we were joking behind the scenes saying I look like Minda, but I just don't have the hair. So once you see Minda tonight, she looks beautiful. But let me tell you some things that have popped off with the Right Within book so far. Minda Harts was featured on MSNBC last week on the Alicia Mendez show, and she was also featured in Time magazine for a Right Within book as the top 8 books to read in October. And last but not least, this last week, she was an Amazon.com bestseller. So make sure you give it up in the chat for the Right Within book. Keep reading it. Keep buying the audio book of it. It's just an amazing project. Take your time. We understand that people have already read through it like the first day. It's like, opening up Christmas presents. It's just an amazing time. So make sure we get some virtual love in the chat. Let us know where you are streaming from. Let us know where you are, sending the comments from. And without further ado, here is our two-time best-selling author, Minda Harts.
Thanks, Mike.
Yes.
Good job. Appreciate you. Look good tonight, brother.
Thank
so
you.
he didn't know I am a twin, unless you might not know. Yeah. But thanks a lot, Mike. I'm so excited that you all are here tonight. I'm getting ready to do a reading, and then we'll get into our conversation. I just want to say thank you. I have been on virtual book tour every day since last Monday, and every night has been a different vibe. So I just want to say thank you to those who have. If it's your first time, welcome, welcome. If you've been rocking with me every stop, I just want to say thank you. Success is not a solo sport, and I'm just so excited. And my conversation, I'm gonna say my conversation sister tonight, Jovian, Zayne, you already know. If you know her work, then you already know we are gonna take it to, we're gonna vibrate higher tonight. So I hope that you're ready. Hope you got your water handy and your church fans, because we might just take you somewhere you weren't expecting to go tonight. But if you haven't gotten Right Within, I hope that you purchase that. We'll drop it in the link, in the chat. And then throughout the night, if you have questions, there will be time at the last 10 to 15 minutes where we will take your questions. So just drop them in the chat. I know that people are watching on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And so we're so happy. Before I jump into reading a little bit, I want to share, I have another brother, and he made this shirt for me. It says, "Be you." Girl, I don't know if you can see it. So I wanted to shout out my brother, Gabe, because part of being right within is being who we need to be for ourselves. And so I just want to thank him for his talent. He has a line called Characters. And so thank you, Gabe, for I wanted to show him some love by wearing this and surprising him today. So I'm going to read from a chapter called Healing from My Soul. Labels, labels, labels. And I'm not talking about designer brands. Has anyone labeled you something that didn't sit well with you? For example, when Bernadine, Angela Bassett, burned up her husband's things in the front yard and waiting to exhale, some men might have labeled her crazy. But in fact, she wasn't crazy. Bernadine was hurt. Or another example, too often when a new mother was experiencing depression, before we knew the term postpartum depression, many folks in our communities would dismiss her as crazy. I think this is one of the reasons the angry Black women trope is so prevalent. It's easy for someone to call us angry or crazy than to engage in a real dialogue. And perhaps this crazy label is just another additional baggage, keeping many women of color from finding our healing. Maybe fear of that label is why so many people of color avoid seeking the help we need. This ridiculous narrative that only crazy people get help continues to get passed on from one generation to another. Do you know what crazy is? Saying dismissive stuff like that. I think back to every time I've heard an elder say, "She ain't right in the head no more." But did anyone ever ask her what healing looks like for her? Allow yourself to think about how many Black women and other women of color went to their graves labeled crazy, when probably all they needed was some healing from their pain. The pain of being isolated, overlooked, never promoted, and without support. Not to mention all the other heartbreaks we experience in life. I write this book in remembrance of all our sisters who died with trauma in their bodies, who were never able to be right within. I don't want another one of us going to our graves labeled anything other than free. And that's just a passage from Right Within. And now I'm going to bring my sister to the stage so we can get this conversation started. Jovian, how are you, my sister?
I am great. I'm so great, Minda. I am touched deeply to be in conversation with you. So happy to share this space. What's up, everybody? I'm Jovian. So glad to be here and just to acknowledge this moment. Minda, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's actually where we're going to start. We're going to start with congratulations because you're putting us on your back for our own healing. Like we are finding our path to healing because of you. So congratulations and thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for saying yes, for being on the tour with me. And for those who don't know about your work, why don't you show off a little bit. Let them know what you
do. Well, for those who don't know me, again, I'm Jovian Zayne. I'm the founder and CEO of the On Purpose Movement. We are a consultancy that works with for-profits and nonprofits, but typically Fortune 100 and 500 companies. And we are a mission-driven organization supporting people in showing up more purposeful in life. So our whole focus is to help shift company cultures to be more intentional, more core values driven, and more purpose driven. So I show up in the world as an executive coach, a facilitator and trainer, and a keynote speaker to some of your favorite big brands and companies all over. And I can tell you all that, but at the core, what brings me, what drives me is a sense of purpose to encourage people to be their best, to be who they were created to be, which is why I knew Minda right after the memo. And after you and I met years ago at a conference, I was like, oh, she is on that path to purpose. And as your voice has expanded and you have, again, given us so much hope and delight through your work, I was like, whatever I can do to fuel the flame, to ignite this, I was like, oh yeah, let's do this. Let's do this. So I am excited, sis.
Awesome. So shall we get into it?
Let's get into it. Let's get into it. And you said this, you said we're going to vibrate higher. So I just want to acknowledge with people a few things about me because I may take you somewhere and I want you to go with Minda and I. I am the granddaughter of not one, but two Baptist pastors. So call and response is in my blood. So the chat is open. We want to see you active. We want to see you in it. Talk to us, talk to each other, right? And talk to yourself. Be honest about what's here and what comes up for you. Minda, you see, I already got my post-its because girl, I've been in this thing. Let's start here, right? Let's start with hope. You did a beautiful dedication in this book. And I think, when we think about the power of your work, the power of purpose, there is something that is really grounding in what hope does, right? You couldn't get to this book if you didn't have a hope for the future and if you didn't believe something was possible. Hope is the thing that kept our ancestors breastfeeding children who were separated from their other children. Like hope is the reservoir that continues to breathe life into each other and into ourselves. So Minda, what was your hope for the purpose of this book? And talk about it in response to this dedication to us.
Yes, for those who haven't got a chance to either get the book or read the book, I'll just read the dedication so you're vibrating where we are. It says, dedicated to all the Black women who were told they had to be strong for someone else instead of for themselves. And as you said, hope, I hope that we would be able to find, I have the faith to know that we would find what strength means for us, right? Instead of having to be strong for everybody else. I think as Black women, we, often called caretakers and all these other adjectives that we don't have the space to necessarily be vulnerable or say that we need help. And and I believe that we can find that narrative, right? And so I'm saying, I invite you to think about what it's like to be strong for yourself. And that's not a selfish act, that's a selfless act, right? Because when we learn to be strong for ourselves, we actually can show up better for the other people in our lives. But that's kind of what my mindset was when I thought about Right Within. It's like centering us, right? Finally saying, what is it like for me? What is my happiness? What are my hopes? What are my dreams? Those sorts of things.
I love that. Like, you dare to ask yourself the honest question that requires vulnerability.
Yeah.
What is true for you? I mean, I think so often we can understand our pain, but we don't even get to a place of purpose because we haven't connected to the vision that we could see for ourselves, which requires us to tap into hope, right? And we know that hope is, or depression is the absence of hope. So we know that with this book, there is a hope that there's more for us. And here's the thing, right? You and I talked about this. We had dinner, 2 weeks ago now? And we were cackling over stories that we've come through. And it can be kind of funny, but still painful when we look back at like the people in this book, the Dannys, the Pennies. Like, these are people who you've experienced the microaggressions from them. These are the people who have overlooked you, right? Let's talk and let's give some context to the challenge. Like, why a book like Right Within was so important. Talk a little bit about what you mean when you describe racial trauma.
Yeah, it's interesting when you put it that way. And I wish that we had like almost a camera there that night, the microphones. we were in it, but we're gonna bring a little bit of that tonight. But
right.
For me, Right Within was so important because I started to normalize my trauma. I started to normalize it. And I thought, well, this must just be what it's going to be like for women like me in the workplace, right? They're going to talk about your hair. They're going to butcher your name. They're going to say the things, all the things. And because no one's ever calling them out, I don't feel safe either, that this is just normal, right? I didn't think that there could be a better way. I just thought that I never understood what different could be. But Audre Lorde said, beware of feeling you're not good enough to deserve it. Do we not deserve to have equity? Do we not deserve humanity, dignity, respect? That should be table stakes. That should be when you enter into the relationship with the new work. A lot of other people are experiencing that. Why am I not experiencing that? And I started to think about all the other discriminations that happen. We highlight sexual harassment. We highlight all these other things. But when we talk about race, up until not too long ago, that was like a no-no. Don't play the race card. Don't make it about race. And it's like, well, but it is, right? But I could never say that. And so I would always tell myself, just to make it through the day, well, they don't mean any harm. Or maybe that isn't what they meant, right? And then you start to question yourself. And then I started to pull back and I said, you know what? Racism distorts the personality. I am no longer the person that I once was in this environment. And now it's affecting other pieces of my life. And
Absolutely.
that trauma is not good. And I should have never been exposed to it. And I know so many of us are in past and current experiences. And I said, you know what? We got to talk about it. No more sweeping it under the rug. We got to put this stuff right on top of the table, right? So that everybody can see it. So
right there.
That's traumatic, right? Any type of toxicity is traumatic. And I felt like we needed to address that.
Absolutely. I love that you call that in. I mean, what you just said in terms of how racism distorts the personality, it distorts our personality, it distorts other people's personality. It's like we're in conversation with Toni Morrison when she talks about how racism strips us of our humanity, right? Like, we are afraid to dream. We see all the time, and data shows this. And go ahead, put a +1 in the chat if this is an experience you've had where women, particularly women of color, we experience the scarlet letter effect, which is you make a mistake one time. Let's say it's a minimal mistake. You're late to a meeting, 3 minutes late. And next thing you know, the pitch you were going to do in the meeting is all of a sudden not as good. It doesn't matter as much. And your review for the next performance review cycle is completely negative. And you've gotten this stain on you that seems to follow. If that's ever been your experience or anything like it, a small thing that's followed you, that's the scarlet letter effect. We see the data that says this happens disproportionately to us, to women of color, right? And so to your point, that racial trauma of all of a sudden I'm second guessing myself. I have no space to risk. I have no space, right, to take a chance. It devolves us. It strips us. So, when you talk about the small things that could happen, Minda, right? Like, I'm late one time, or the experiences of microaggressions, right? That are described as like those mosquito bites,
right,
that we get, like, oh, let me touch your hair, to, we can name all of them. How have you learned to mitigate some of the microaggressions that you experience in the workplace and that you talk about in this great book?
Yeah, thank you. Like you said, all the things. Hair seems to be like the top top hit in the workplace, unfortunately. But it's interesting because I think because for so long I thought it was just normal.
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily have the tools back then to unpack it, right? Because again, I just thought that this is what we deal with. But one of the tools that I use, relying heavily on my faith to get me through those moments, but then also realizing that if Bob can say whatever Bob wants to, why can't I respectfully create boundaries for Bob, right? And just say, no, you can't talk to me like that. Would you like somebody talking to your daughter like that? Right? I started to humanize my own experience. If my coworkers couldn't humanize me and see me as human, then I'm going to humanize myself. I was on Book Talk a couple nights ago with Dr. Thema Brian Davis, and she said, I won't participate in my own oppression. And it's part of that, right? it's part of that.
Wait, we're going to pause for the cause. So are you saying, Minda, that, and my therapist, I can already hear in the background, like, yes, ask it. Are you saying that when we do not erect the right kind of boundaries that protect ourselves, we are participating in our own oppression?
Listen, when she said it, it snatched my edges clean.
Okay. That's why I have to wear this turban.
I was like, edge control what? Like where? But it's true, right? And when you're in it,
it's good.
Because for so long, our voices have been silenced, right? So it's been a coping mechanism. I realized that there are things at stake. But what if not just one of us are creating boundaries, but we all start to create boundaries, right? And the other tool that I used when it was happening is I was waiting on my colleagues to say something like, didn't you hear what they said?
And the bystanders?
Yeah, the bystander. I was waiting on them. But then I realized, you know what, Minda, I don't have to wait on Chris to acknowledge that Kim said that. You can affirm yourself, right? I can do that. They dismissed you in all kinds of ways, but I get to take the power back. I get to redefine the narrative. And that's partially why I wrote Right Within, to say, we don't have to wait for somebody else to say that was racism. Part of our healing is calling it what it is. And that's where we are.
That's it. Part of healing is calling it what it is. That's right. You cannot heal something that you won't name and that you won't acknowledge. So it does require us naming it. And we should acknowledge that it is more difficult when we are existing within a country that has refused to name and to acknowledge the truth of our inception for centuries. And so it is a difficult thing. We are up, we're climbing up a hill. But as we know, race is the centralizing, organizing theme in our country. So to ignore it is to ignore the truth of our existence and all of the other systems that are structurally and institutionally put into place to keep us organized in a caste system, as Isabel Wilkerson would acknowledge in her book Caste. So here's my question, right? When we think about the tactical and practical, which I love to do in my work. So if you're in the chat now, get ready to acknowledge some things that could be real for you, right? Minda, let's acknowledge triggers, right? Because it's hard to name a thing if you are not self-aware around what kind of gets you riled up. So I know for me, when let's say if I'm co-facilitating a session, particularly let's say with another white woman, if she jumps in on me a few times while I'm speaking, I could be triggered.
Yeah.
Because I feel like my voice is being minimized, she's speaking over, especially if she restates something I just said, right? What are some of your triggers? Because in the book, you talked a little bit about team meetings, but what are some that you've acknowledged that you had to identify?
That was part of my healing process. Is I had to start noticing patterns of abuse. And those patterns were creating triggers for me, right? And so team meetings were a very big trigger point. I have a lot of anxiety before going into meetings, but I didn't realize what it was at first, right? I was just like, let me make sure my hair is this way. Let me make sure I don't use this type of language. Let me make sure, my outfit is, I'm constantly questioning, do I belong in this room? Because I also know that there's a colleague who might say something slick, right? So I'm like sitting, waiting for it to happen, because I know
you're on edge.
I know it's coming, right? I'm just waiting. It might happen at the start. It might happen at the middle. It might happen at the end, but I know it's coming. And so I'm always on edge, and you can't do your best work when it's, we're in Halloween, it's October, right? And so you're seeing all this Halloween stuff. And I think about scary movies, and you get the phone call and you're like, wait, oh, it's coming from the cube next door. Oh, it's coming from the cube. Like, you don't even know.
But it is. Yeah.
Like,
when you're waiting for a boo, you can't. You can't project, you can't lead like that. Yeah.
Team meetings is where I found I was getting, talked over, as you mentioned, or couldn't get a word in edgewise, or somebody was taking my ideas or volunteering me for something because I don't have any kids and I can work every single day of the week. You know what I mean? Like, so team meetings were very much a trigger point for me. And I had to realize that I need to create norms. I need to let my manager or whomever know that, when this is happening in a meeting, how about this? Providing solutions, right? I notice that every time I'm in a meeting, Keith is always talking over me. And I know that you have noticed that in the past. So in order to feel supported, I need for you to help diffuse that, right? Giving myself permission to let them know what is A-okay or not okay with me. But for so long, I had silenced myself because at the expense of my own well-being. But yeah, so those, I think it's important for us to understand our triggers so that we can ignite that healing that we need.
I love that, calling people in. Here's something I'll add to that, because what Minda just offered to everyone who's listening is a tactic to mitigate microaggressions, right? So leveraging your manager's support. She said something really specific. Minda, I don't even know if you knew it in the way that you did, but you said you went to your manager and said, hey, I need some support here. I know you've seen this happen, so here's what could happen, right? You gave a specific solution. Now, for some of us, we're thinking to ourselves, I don't want to have to do that work, which I get. Another offering I'll give to you is leaning into the values of your manager or whoever else has acknowledged at some point in time that they care about equity. They care about you. This is a moment you can say to them, you've expressed how much you care about diversity and equity, and I know that you do, and appeal to their highest self, and then call them into that action. So they feel like, oh yeah, you're right. I can't do this. I'm supposed to do it, right? So keep calling them in. Minda, you see that the chat is popping, right?
Yes,
you see it. Yeah, I see it too. What about this one, sis? Because this was good. Let me go back to this in the book. First of all, cover gorgeous.
Thank you.
Is that Ticket Sumter? I meant to ask you.
No, it's not. It's actually, it's funny. When I first posted the cover reveal on my Instagram, somebody tagged the woman who it was. I believe her name is Maxine. And it was her. And it's been so funny to like go back and forth with her.
So beautiful, right? Just, we got to tell Maxine. She makes me really want to like, okay, I'm mindful. I'm still.
It's a Zen cover. I love it.
It's so good. Okay, you talk about this idea of prudent paranoia. Talk a little bit about what that is and how do we work within that? Because I know that there's some acknowledgement of truth there, but also what do we need to be getting away from?
Yeah. Roderick Kramer, he talks about prudent paranoia in the way of the more you notice, the more you worry, the more you worry, the more you notice. And I think that is something that many of us may not realize, that when we're in these toxic workplaces is that we're paranoid, right? That we don't, I talked about it, right? Waiting for it to happen in a meeting because we know the triggers, right? And then you start to question, you're like, well, if Tom is always speaking over me, now other people are doing it, and why are they doing it? And is he going to do it this time again? And when you realize that you're in these, let's just call it what it is, sis, it's an abusive relationship in many cases.
My.
I don't know if we're ready to go there, but it's Thursday, so.
No, I think that we are. Yeah.
So when you're in these abusive relationships, you're starting to question everything, every single thing. And when you know darn well it's not you, but because people are treating you this way and you're in this toxic relationship, you have no other person to question and fault, right? And so I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but then I started to kind of beat myself up like, oh, I didn't do the thing. Or maybe they wouldn't have said that because I didn't show up this way. And again, it's that paranoia. And that's how that stuff starts to show up and manifest in our lives.
Absolutely. And then to your point earlier, we start to morph into someone we don't even recognize anymore. And that's like, to me, that's the real loss. Yeah. When we lose the essence of ourselves because we have allowed that toxic relationship to strip us of the things that allow us to live wholeheartedly, which would be like to live from a space of vulnerability. So we're allowed to take risks. We're okay if we're uncertain sometimes, and we feel like we can have some emotional exposure. So much of these companies and these toxic environments, they take it from us. And then there's no wonder why we show up in a relationship at home and we're chirping off at our friends, or like we're disconnected from the group text, all the stuff. That's the part that's so painful. So Minda, what about the healing, right? Because I think we all know what we're up against in so many ways. And what I do want to acknowledge is we haven't even talked about intersectionality yet, which depending on the different ways that we identify, maybe as queer Black women or, immigrant folks who are identifying as people of color, whatever it is, there are additional burdens and layers.
Yes.
And yet we know that there is healing. So you had to unpack some stuff for us in order to get to your own journey in healing, which I know involved that couch with a therapist, and it also involved that Jesus that we know about. Talk a little bit about that. Like, what has been your own path to get to healing while writing this book? And get specific as much as you would like.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I do like wear my heart on my sleeve and write within. So if you haven't got to go ahead and do that. But what I will say is that healing for me is not a one-time event, but a lifestyle. Like I'm committing to healing every single day. I'm committing to mental health every day, right? Because when I was in those toxic environments, it started to impede upon my mental health. It manifested in anxiety, depression, panic attacks. On the surface, people probably thought I had it all together, right? But internally, it was a constant battle. And I kept, as I mentioned, kept questioning myself. Well, maybe if I show up differently, maybe people won't treat me this way, or they're just walking all over me. Why is that? Instead of putting and holding people accountable, right? The abusive behaviors that are happening in the workplace. But what I realized is that I could not keep going on. Lauryn Hill said, "How you gonna win if you ain't right within?" And I had to figure out what it meant for me to be right.
You can't be a lost one. Let's go.
You can't. Ready or not, right? It's like.
Did you get your tickets to the tour? But anyway, okay.
Yeah, I need to still do that. But I started to unpack and investigate and interrogate what that meant for me, because I want to be the most healthiest version of myself. In the first place I started was faith, because that's how I was raised, through a Christian household. And that's my faith today, Christianity. And so I definitely had to look toward the heels from where my help comes from, right? I had to start there, and then realize that that's not the only tool that I believe God gives us to heal. There are other tools, other healers. And so, but what I did unpack is that you have people in the Bible, even if you are not a Christian, or I do include interfaith conversation inside the memo. But what I talked about from my perspective, I looked at the Bible and I saw that David, one of the most popular Bible characters, and Joseph in the Bible, they both experienced trauma, right? Two people that God favored still experienced trauma, right? And so I realized, but he gave them a way out of that trauma. They found their healing, right? So I was encouraged by their walk and by their faith to get to my healing journey. And through my journey, I decided to use therapy as well, because Jesus can heal you on the couch too, right? You can go to the altar and you could go to the couch.
Listen, you know that I know, man, the couch, the chair, the Zoom, the whatever, absolutely.
All the things, right? And so for me, I realized that I needed to have tools to be able to navigate these things, because we're not always in a position where we can just leave, but we still can access healing, right? So how do you heal when you feel like you're in hell, right? You still deserve that.
Ooh, that's it. I want to go there, because I know there are some people in the chat and just around who probably are just even too afraid to even comment, because they're dealing with paranoia. They're anxious just being here, right? What about the folks, because they're breadwinners, or they can't leave. They're trapped in that place at the moment with finances. What do you do? What are some techniques, some tips for people who need to be healing in the midst of their hell?
Yeah. Well, first off, we hold space for you, because we know that that's real. And that's one of the reasons why I dedicated this book to Black women in particular, because we hold a lot on our backs. A lot of people are connected to our success, etc., livelihood, all those sorts of things. And sometimes we don't ever get to make decisions for us. Right. And I think a lot of us stay in certain jobs because so many other things, we have so many responsibilities that if we don't do it, who else is going to do it? right? And the world has placed that heavy burden on us as well. Like if we didn't come out to the polls, then you already know where we would be. Like we take everything like backs against the wall. We got to do this, right? And so sometimes we can't leave. But what I will say for you is that when I was in a position where I was not able to leave, I started to redefine my narrative of like, oh, I can't wait. I'm counting, instead of ticking the calendar, like when can I leave? Was how do I make this work for me, right? What is it that I need to get out of this to prepare me for my next, right? Toni Morrison said, you are your best thing. Reminding myself that I am my best thing, and what can I get out of this current job? Can I ask for stretch assignments? Can I use professional development stipends so that I can pad my resume so that I can start looking and be even more of an asset to my next place, right? And the other thing is, don't take that baggage with you, right? Leave that baggage there at hell. Don't take it to your heaven, right? Because that's part of the healing too. Like Erykah Badu said, pack light, because all those bags gonna get in your way, and they eventually will if we don't heal.
Listen, there are just so many things and so many voices you brought in there, from Badu to Toni. We could keep going. And I mean, the key piece around like the packing light, I love, because that is our work, right? We can take stuff from one place that has got no business being there, and we take a season that has passed into the next season. And it's like, sis, why are you wearing a North Face at the beach? We're not doing that. We're not doing that. But that actually leads to a point I want to make, because you can't be your best self by yourself. You've heard me say that plenty of times. I say that all the time. And sometimes we don't even know the bags that we're carrying. Yes. The bags that are on our back have frankly morphed into our spine, and we are hunchback and we're walking forward, but we have no idea how burdened we are. So who are some of the people that you believe we need to make sure we have with us that can help us unpack those bags and dismantle and decolonize our mind from the heavy weight that we've been carrying?
Yes. We need a squad, right? Just like
squad up.
Squad, you need people, because I think sometimes for many of us, because of that strong narrative, we suffer in silence, or we suffer in isolation, right? I've done it plenty of times. But what I realized was, it's okay when you feel safe to share your pains, your hurts, your wins, all of the things with people who can pray for you, right? Who can encourage you, who can affirm you, because oftentimes this world won't do it for us. So we need people, right? So that could be, your family, it could be friends, it could be a therapist, right? It could be an ally, someone you've identified inside the workplace that, when over the last year, many of our, white counterparts would ask us, what do you need me to do? How do you want me to show up for you? You know what happened? You know what, Gina, remember what happened in last week when Tom said what he said? Next time that happens, what would be helpful is if you said X.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's where you can help me, right? And I think if and giving people what good looks like for us, right? But asking people, I know again we talk about doing the work, right? But this work is for us, right? Letting people know what we need. So explore all of the various tools, because you think about the bags, like we talk about these trauma bags. Sometimes when you have too big of a purse and you throw in a bunch of like crap inside it, and you can't even, you're fumbling around, you don't even know what's inside it.
You mean me last night? Couldn't find my keys? Yeah.
You can't find your keys, you can't find the mints, you can't find anything. You don't want to be fumbling for tools when you need them. Get your tools, get your squad, and have them ready. So, just like you have the hammer, right? Maybe you don't use it every day, but it's there when you need it. And so healing, again, it's an everyday practice.
I love it. The everyday practice. It used to be said, like, healing is the new black. I love that you're calling it healing is a lifestyle, and it is. It's a daily practice. There's something else I want to reflect back that you said, Minda, that was powerful, which is there is this common narrative that we as Black women will go to bat for everything, our country, the world, right? Like we will just put stuff on us because we know, or we've been trained what to do and how to do it. But when it comes to taking the best care of ourselves, that's always circumvented by a responsibility to others. And so what I hope people are gathering is like a shift in the narrative, and truly understanding you've got to have a full cup at some point to be able to pour from. And part of what I'm hearing, and we know is in this book, is this is about us going from parched to full, right? To refreshed. And we have to get that kind of nourishment for ourselves. There is another part to healing, right? A healing journey. And this is about grief. And it could be, as you talk about in your book, this idea that there are careers that could be deferred and that we will not be a part of anymore. Our choice, the choice has been made for us. And if that's you in the chat, I want to see you right now. Like if you're someone who is grieving what you thought was going to be, go ahead and acknowledge it. We're here with you. We want to hold the space with you. And Minda, I want you to walk folks through that process. You got a 4-step process, if I'm not mistaken, of mourning a career deferred. So girl, walk us through real fast. Those 1, 2, 3, 4.
You know, the thing that when I was writing this book, it dawned on me that many of us never mourned the careers we thought we wanted to have, that we had planned on having.
What was yours? Let me ask you first. What was yours?
Well, it was my former life when I left. I was a consultant in philanthropy, and I was good at that job. But because I had, if you've read the book or even read the memo, I talk about this person named Carrie.
Oh.
It smoked that career out, right? Like, and I had other bad characters too. She wasn't working alone, but that's another thing. But I think that I didn't give myself a chance to mourn a career deferred. My dream was taken from me, not because of anything I did, right? Mm-hmm. You might remember the date as 1965, 1988, 2001, 2003, 2020, 2021, where you feel like I worked so hard to get here. And why do I have to be the one to leave? Why don't these people have to leave and I get to stay and do my best work?
That
right? Times we're the ones that have to leave. And so when I left, I never gave myself an opportunity to mourn that. And that's part of that healing, right? To say, wow, that was part of my dreams. And now it was taken away from me. But as we do, we clean up the spilled milk and we move on to the next thing, right? Never having time to sit. And I'm saying, if you want to, I invite you to mourn what was once something you loved, right? And I talk about these steps of mourning a career because I think that's part of our healing, right? To identify that did hurt, that still hurts. Many of us were forced into entrepreneurship, not because we wanted to, but because we felt like we didn't have any options, right? We needed to create a more equitable and safe space for ourselves. So I talk about accepting it, right? Mm-hmm. For so long, I think I wanted to pretend that wasn't the narrative, right? Just to get to the next thing. Mm-hmm. Right? I accept that this is not I belong in this place, or I belong in every place, but not every place deserves to have me. So at some point, I gotta leave, right?
Pause, Minda. Say it again, slower for the people in the back, child.
Yes. The doors of the church are open. The chat is open. I belong in every space, but not every space deserves to have me, right? I don't have to make everything work. And I'm going to accept that this is not the place for me anymore. Mm-hmm. I accept that. I also had to process it, right? I had to process that loss. I think it's hard to sometimes accept something, right? But now we all need to go through our own process. And that looks different for each of us. Might take you 24 hours, might take you 10 years, right? But to process what happened, because I feel like that's healthy. Adjust to it. You know, when people would ask me, well, how's that one job going, Minda? I know you moved from this place to this. And, you know, I was trying to move on, but people kept bringing it back up to me, right? And that's not helpful in my conversation. And so the last one is redefine it. No, I'm not there. I'm doing something else now, right? Mm-hmm. I don't have to engage in the whys, what happened if I don't want to, right? But I get to redefine it. And my biggest tragedy that I felt at that time in my life in 2014 turned out to be one of my biggest triumphs. So wow. I redefined what that process looks like. And so, but I had to go through the process. And so I would invite everyone, if you do have that experience, to acknowledge that hurt, right? And I think, again, Black women acknowledging that they've been harmed out loud and talking about it, that's part of the healing process.
It is. It's a new way that healing, it's a new look for healing, because we may not always see that done publicly in ways that are healthy. You know, there are shows that pretend to be providing healing online to us, or on TV show, but we know it's that's not the real work. And it's actually not even a Band-Aid. It's frankly doing more damage. I won't name names, but you and I both know. There's something that actually just struck me, Minda, this idea of being okay, acknowledging that the dream that you once had isn't all that's yours. And you said, and like if we go to church real quick, you know, in the Bible in James chapter 1, verse 2-4, it says, count it all joy, my brother and my sisters, when you go through trials of any time, because those trials are meant to perfect your faith and build a different kind of endurance in you. So when I think about what you went through in 2014, 2015, you talked about how that transitioned you into that trial was now a triumph. And so I'm hearing like, oh, not the glasses meant to do it to us, but that's giving you like, it's that pain that you were able to find a new kind of purpose in your life. What would you say now? Like, how would you encourage someone who is trying to redefine their pain into purpose?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's hard to redefine that when you're hurting. Right? It's hard. When I cried the deepest cry in 2014 in my car, one lash on the seat, one lash on the ground, you know, just hurting.
Yes. That would be, I was in my truck.
Yeah.
It was 2008.
I could not see past that pain, right? I was stuck. I was paralyzed in it because I felt like I had no other route. But it was, I believe that God shows up for us when we need it. And I remember crying in that car, and I turned on the radio, and Whitney Houston's Where Does Broken Hearts Go comes on the radio. And at that point, I laughed and cried, right? And I'm like,
oh, yeah, that's like about you, but not at all.
Yes. And I thought, where do broken hearts go of women of color when we can't take the workplace anymore? And it was in that moment I made a decision that I didn't know what it looked like at that time, sis, but I said, I'm going to use my voice. I'm going to use my voice so that there's none of us have to keep crying in our cars. None of us have to keep crying in the stalls, right? None of us are having these panic attacks and anxieties that we have to talk about this stuff out loud. So many of the women that came before us, they use their voice, right? And we are beneficiaries of their voice, beneficiaries of their courage. And I sat in that car still feeling defeated, but I said, I'm going to figure out how someone else can be a beneficiary of my courage. I'm going to change this around. This isn't where I'm feeling traumatic right now. I'm feeling the trauma, but this isn't where my story ends. It's where it begins. And if you would have told me when I was sitting in that car feeling defeated that I'd have the memo, my first book, and it become a best-selling book, then I'd have an opportunity to write right within. I'm going to claim it my second best-selling book. And
we're going to do that.
And a third book come out next year. Like,
that you're already writing?
Are you kidding me? You know, are you kidding me? And so if I can do it, you can do it. We both are doing it. So let us be the role models. Let us be here to encourage you and root for you, because your story doesn't end because of what somebody said to you and about you that doesn't even know you.
God, come on, man. Well, your story can't end for no bystander. But even the thing, like, let me just build on what you're saying and encourage someone. Even if they do know you, they don't know the totality of you. You don't even know the full totality of you. You are expanding, you are growing. And so the theme in what you just said, Minda, is about allowing ourselves to redefine a moment. And that takes work. It does not just take a moment. Like, I think it's important before we get into some of your questions. So if you all have more questions, please log them, throw them into the chat, want to acknowledge them and bring your voices in there. But this idea that, you know, we can't heal by ourselves. You've been healing for a while, Minda. Like these stories and calling back, you know, from 2014, we're seeing a product that's not finished because it's a day-to-day process, but just want to make sure people understand and get perspective and not be fooled by a veneer of like, oh, they look so done and polished. Nah, sis, nah, bro, this is day to day. It's day to day, right? It's a commitment to be your best, though. It's a commitment to find that healing. There's a question here, Minda. I would love to loft to you that I've seen in the chat to make sure we get their voices in. You good with that, sis?
Yes, and also if I want you to chime in too, so but let's do it.
Well, I will meet you where you are. So here's a great question, right? You folks may or may not know this. You're a professor at NYU, which I just love. So, and at Wagner, which is a school I also attended, is a focus on public service. So there's a class or a question here that comes from Courtney, and she says, what kind of classes should we be introducing at the collegiate level to new leaders to help them to unpack trauma and ensure that we're minimizing oppressive workplace practices?
That's a great question. Thank you, Courtney. I think that, so I have the pleasure of teaching a course called talent management, and we talk about how you have one-on-ones, right? Giving feedback, all of those sorts of things, because as managers, many of us are put in these positions, but we've had no training. So of course you're gonna harm somebody. That's gonna happen, right? Not intentionally, but sometimes intentionally. But so I feel like we really need to provide our leaders and our managers and those aspiring to be managers the tools to be successful, right? Because 9 times out of 10, we're going through our day, we're just trying to get things done, and we're not always thinking about how everyone on our team is experiencing the workplace. And so I do believe that emotional intelligence should be a core competency.
Say it again.
Emotional intelligence, right? Because 2 things can be true at the same time. You may never experience racism or sexism or any other ism, but someone else might be experiencing it every single day, right? So being able, and then the other thing I think is important is conflict resolution, because even though we're adults, we don't all know how to communicate effectively. We can't hear people out, right? We get defensive. We think it's about us. We put our ego into it. And we can actually have good conversations if we understood how to communicate with each other. So I think that those are 2. And then I do believe everything within those, you have a race lens or gender lens, intersectionality lens, because you're not going to be a 21st century leader and beyond needs to have a cultural competency.
Yeah. And if you, just to close it out, if you don't, you will find yourself out of work soon. It's just, it's impossible. We are a global society. And so you have to have that. What I would add to that, Courtney, is that I really deeply believe, along with emotional intelligence, shout out to Daniel Goleman with that, I would really hope that folks would be able to begin to learn at a collegiate level concepts around courageous conversations. So what are real practices to employ to show up empathetically, to be able to hold space for someone else, and to be able to hold an opposing idea without dismantling an entire relationship, which is what we're seeing in our country time and time again. That to the extent of cancel culture, right? So I think that also helps us to learn what it looks like to learn in public, which is really important, which we have completely eradicated, it seems. So we're afraid to take risk in learning and pushing and exploring, because if we're wrong, then we're out, right? Yeah. So gotta introduce grace back into learning, which it absolutely necessitates. Lastly, I'll say is this idea of, oh shoot, it just escaped me, but it was, work around likely boundaries. I'm realizing, I don't know about you, Minda, I know you talk about this in the book, everything comes back to boundaries, yo. Everything. Like, how do you erect them? How do you exercise them, understand them? We need to learn early on, because a lot of us are probably learning not the best practices at home, but you got to start to learn what does it look like to acknowledge boundaries, set them up for yourself, and live with them with confidence, for sure.
I love that so much. And I was reading some of the comments in the chat. There's something I wanted to post to you, though, sis, because you said it, cancel culture. I think we have to kind of talk a little bit about that, because the reality is people are going to make mistakes, right? But the intent, was their intent malicious? Are they doing this every day, or was this a once in a lifetime thing? I'm just curious your thoughts, because, I know there's some probably allies or managers out there, and they don't lean into their courage because they're afraid that they're going to do or say the wrong thing.
Yeah. Well, here's what I'll say, and I'll just talk specifically to folks who are holding majority identities or privileged identities in our world. I think you got to show up with a certain kind of humility and intention in your spirit that other people could read, right? And that requires, for most folks who are holding that identity, a different shift, a different hat to put on that is not as comfortable. But as my husband and I talk about all the time, shout out to people who are in relationships of any sort, if you're concerned about being right more than you are about getting it right, which Brene Brown talks about a lot, you're going to find yourself on the outskirts of a healthy relationship. So I think that, whenever I'm dealing with folks who are aspiring to be allies, what's helped me more lately, Minda, is putting myself in the position of my own privileged skin. So I'm a cis Black woman. And Lord knows there's a lot of oppression that I encounter day to day. You and I both know. But there are other parts of my identity that also carry privilege in our world. The amount of money I make now is different from even some people in my family. I am able-bodied currently, all of that. I'm cis, right? Like we know the numbers of trans folks who are being murdered in our country. Those rates are astronomically high. And so when I'm thinking about how I can show up for communities that I am not a part of presently, that's when I can start to think about, well, I don't want to be canceled just because I'm attempting to build an honest relationship. But I got to show up with humility, right? Like if they tell me you're not doing this right, or if they tell me this hurt my feelings, I got to just accept it as, okay, I'm going to sit with that and I can be stung by it. But me being wrong in a moment doesn't mean I am wrong as a person. That's the thing about canceling, right? Like, and this is back to the spiritual piece for us, right? This is where I think our faith shows us. If God hasn't said I'm wrong as a person, I'm sorry, Mariel. I'm sorry, Catherine. I'm not going to let you tell me I'm wrong. Like I'm bad at the core, because my God hasn't said that. I can be bad in behavior, but this is the difference between like shame and even like embarrassment or guilt. But I'm not bad at the core. I could have done something bad, but my essence is not.
That was so good. That was so good. And I think it's important to understand that all of us are going to make mistakes, right? Yeah. At some point, we might, the intent behind it, right? I often tell this story of being in class one time, and I thought I was being so progressive, and I told all my students the first day of class, go around, give your bios, and use your pronouns, right? And I thought I was doing something, right? I'm like, I'm creating safe space, people can say their pronouns. And at the end of class, my bubble was definitely bursted. I had a student that waited till the end, till everybody left. Thankfully, they had some grace with me, right? And they approached me, which I know power dynamics can be tough.
Absolutely.
They said, Professor Harts, I appreciate how you asked everyone to go around and give their bios and their pronouns, but I wanted to make you aware that, that's not always safe. People don't always feel safe doing that. People don't want to out themselves. And so I know you might not have intended harm, but it could have caused harm. And I said, you know what? Thank you for telling me, right? That was not my intent, but I could have made it a thing, right? So I could have made it.
Mm-hmm.
But I thanked her. I was thankful that she felt safe enough to tell me, right? And then the next time I taught the class and I didn't beat myself up in the moment, right? I felt bad, because that was my intention, but I didn't make it about me. I said, okay, I'm going to learn from this. This is a lesson,
that part.
Right? So the next semester that I taught the class, I learned from what was told to me. On the board, I put a list of 5 things. One of them is pronouns. Choose 3 that you want to share with us. But at least I put
That's great.
Let you know that this is a safe space for you to show up with who you need to be, right? And so we all can learn, right?
That's good.
Space.
Good. That's good. And even you telling that story right now, you're learning in public.
Yep.
Right. And we can't heal if we're not watching each other learn, honestly. And if we're not learning, we can't heal.
We can't. That's tweetable. Right there.
So many of us be walking around, not even like half band-aids on the arm, bleeding out, talking about something. I'm gonna be better, girl. Sis, no, you're hemorrhaging. I'm not going to brunch with you. You're a mess.
Yeah.
Let's actually go take care of what we need to take care of. Real talk, right?
Yeah. Get some healing in your toolkit, sis. Yeah.
Yes. Here's another question for you, Minda. Oh, this is a good one, Erica. So Erica says, how do you not take the baggage? I realized my entire career I've been fighting gaslighting, which is so real, and it's baggage. She's wondering, how do we take it off?
That's a good question. And it definitely could take time, but this is the one thing is we first to acknowledge that we might have it in our bag, right? And what are those things? And I think when we start to do the work, we'll slowly start to take those things out of it. You remember like back in the day in school, you'd have your show and tell, you get up in your bag and you'd like You take it out your bag and you put it onto and lighten the load, right? But I think being intentional, knowing that we might have those triggers that we talked about earlier. What are those things, right? I talk about this woman Penny in the book, and she said some wild stuff to me that you'll have to read about. And at one time in my career, I would have taken what she said to me and all her trash and put it in my bag and take it to my cube with me and hold on to it and ruminate on it. And then I'd leave and I'd take it home and take it everywhere I went, right? I'd be at brunch sipping mimosas with it in my bag. It would just show up in everything, right? But then I realized I don't have to take their stuff with me, right? This is theirs. So when she would say certain things to me, I would leave that stuff in her cube with her and I'd go on about my business, right? And so learning that light, identifying what those things are, if it's anxiety, it's depression, because you deserve to be free. You want to know why? Because when you get to your next best place, you don't want to be looking around and wondering if something's going to pop out. You just want to be able to be and enjoy, because we have been exposed. That PTSD will show up. That's why we need our tools, so that when we feel that happening, we can call our healers. We can tap into those sources. You want to have to add to that?
I love that. Only thing I would add is this idea of making sure you've got your cabinets together to help you understand the difference between what's real and what is fictional. Because I see some comments in here about gaslighting, and I know that, Erica, part of the question is rooted in that too. It's important to be able to have trusted sources to help you kind of vet your own behavior and an understanding of a scenario. That way you can really be able to unpack it and say, oh, that has something to do with me. And you can feel more clear and literally saying, she commented on my outfit. I shouldn't be second guessing it. She's actually inappropriate. And here are the reasons why I now know that. And I'm moving on from it. Case in point today, a good friend, and we got this group chat that stays lit. Shout out to my Ain't Shit crew. But today, one of our friends asked like, hey y'all, I'm just noticing this in behavior of one of my employees. And what I know is like, I know that I've come from a toxic environment and I don't want to pass on toxic behaviors. Tell me if my expectation is off. Like, what about what I'm thinking or experiencing or seeing? Like, give me another lens. So I think to your question, Erica, I'd say you can start to unpack by asking good questions of trusted advisors. That's great friends who are doing well, counselors. I would also just add, Minda, I know you believe in this. Get a coach, y'all. Everyone should have an executive coach if you can afford one. Get your company to pay for one. If you're a Black person right now, this is a great time. If you're a woman of color, like, companies are trying to make sure they're supporting us differently. Great thing to invest in.
That's hard.
No, we have like, what, 2 minutes left?
2 minutes. Do you want to give a final, anything you want to parting words, and how can people find you and support your work too?
My parting words. This is your book. You see how you show up for us.
Listen, but you've been dropping so many gems. Tell people where they can find you and connect with you, please.
Oh, absolutely. I will do that. You all can stay in contact with me, the work that we do, my suite of coaches around being on purpose. And of course, you can celebrate the International Day of Purpose, which happens every year in June. That's June 20th. And so at Jovian Zayne, that's JOVIAN ZAYNE. Feel free to follow me online. I'm most active on Instagram. I pretend on Twitter, but I shut down the real one that I used to go to. So yeah, stay engaged there. But Minda, you should have the real closing words here, friend, because you, again, I keep saying this, but you went back into your own bags to uncover trends and themes and things that I call breadcrumbs that can lead us back to an understanding. What is something, if nothing else, that people walk away with that you hope that they keep in their spirit and that can encourage them back to a place of wholeness and on a continued path of healing?
I love that question. And thank you, Jovian, for being here with me tonight. Again, I'm just so honored to know you and spend time with you. And, your words, even before I knew you, your words have been healing to me. So thank you for how you show up for us. I want to just leave you all to let you know that you deserve to be free. You get to define freedom by your own terms. I realized that I was able to find freedom. Freedom is no longer feeling confined. I realized that I didn't have to be confined by dominant narrative. that I'm not the angry Black woman, that I'm not the feisty Latina, I'm not the docile Asian, that I can bring the most authentic pieces of myself to every space that I need to be for me, right? And so I want you to find what freedom feels like, freedom so that you can experience this life the way you were created to, trauma-free. And if you have not picked up Right Within, I hope that you will. And you know what? Friends don't let friends heal alone. Get it for your peeps, get it for your office book club, get it for everybody, because we need to be talking about this, because we could start our healing, but then there's a piece in there for corporate America to help us continue on and create that safe space for us. So I'm just so honored. Thank you all. Quickly, this is my final night this week for book tour, but we're going to drop the link in tomorrow on Twitter Spaces. We're hosting a conversation. Twitter Spaces is an audio version on Twitter, so if you want to join the conversation tomorrow at 9:30, and then next Monday is my last official stop. It's been such a pleasure, and again, just have a great night, and we invite you to heal. Healing is not a one-time event; it's a lifestyle. Have a good night.